Okay, so we're going to be doing for this very first card in the series here today, this very, what I call simple masking card. Okay, this is masking in the most simple form. Okay, and what we've got here is a little pussycat here in front of this basket of apples, and you can see. But what is interesting is this is not one stamp, this is two stamps. Okay, so you've got the little kitten, which is one stamp. And you have the basket, which is the second stamp. So here we are. This is them. You can see the kitten here and the basket. Two completely different stamps. But the way we've done it is we've masked it so the kitten looks like he's sitting in front of the basket. So it's a very simple process, but I'm going to give you some tips on how to get the best results when you're doing this kind of simple masking. Okay, so first of all, let's grab out the stamps we want. We want Mr. Kitten and we want the basket. They're the two main ones. Also, I'll be using this stamp here, which is this one. It says, "You fill my day with happiness," right here. But let's get started with these first. I'm going to put the little pussycat on my block. And I'm going to put the basket on my block. Okay, so very easy. This card is just 3 pieces of paper. I've got my base white cardstock. I've got my matte underneath, which is Granny Apple Green. I've chosen that colour because some of my apples are the same colour. And then a piece of white, which, as you can see here, just sits inside this green mat. Okay, so I'll put all the measurements for this in the PDF. But those of you who are just watching right now, this piece of white that we're going to stamp on is 9.5 centimetres wide by 13.8 long, and the measurements in inches will also be in the PDF. All right, I'm going to be doing this as a landscape card, and let's start with our very first tip. When you're masking, you need to think a little differently. We need to actually make sure we always put the item that is in the foreground, we stamp that first. So we think, okay, what is in the front? And in this case, the kitten is in front, so we're going to be stamping him first. Okay, I'm just going to do it in Memento ink, Memento black, and I'm just going to make sure I ink up my stamp really, really well, just like this. And I'm also going to make sure, because these are photopolymer stamps, I want to get the best image I can, so I'm going to use a matte, a piercing pad underneath. Okay, and I'm going to be putting my kitten probably about, not quite an inch or not even a couple of centimeters up from the bottom, just here. All right, and he's kind of right there in the middle. Okay, and then I'm going to get my basket. Actually, I will put that aside. I'll be doing that in a minute. The next thing I need to do is stamp the kitten, but I'm going to be stamping him on some masking paper. Now, I'm using the Stampin' Up! Masking paper, but if you don't have this, you can use copy paper, or you can use Post-it notes. Post-it notes are great because they have the advantage of having a little bit of tackiness to the back of them, so they're easier to stick in place when it comes time to stick. Okay, I'm just going to bring this over and I'm going to stamp the kitten again on the masking paper. Now, if you're using copy paper, you don't want to use cardstock because cardstock is too thick. We need something that's thinner. So this is this is a very thin paper. And I'll show you why that is the case very shortly. Okay, I'm going to stamp him here on my masking paper. Okay, so now I have 2 kitty cats, one on my card and one on my masking paper. If you're doing it on a piece of copy paper or a Post-it note, it's exactly the same, no change. The only thing is, if you're doing it on a Post-it note, try and do your stamp where the tackiness or the sticky part of the Post-it note is. That will help you get it so it acts more sticky when you go to apply it to your card. All right, now I'm going to come in, and actually before I cut exactly around, I'm going to cut around loosely. It does make it easier to cut when we're using a smaller piece. Okay, so this is easier than cutting from that great big piece of paper. Okay, now I have stamped the pussycat in the middle of the paper. As you can see, I didn't stamp him right down here in the bottom. I stamped in the middle, and there's a reason why. The back of this masking paper, if you're using the masking paper, has a line here, a split, and that is where you can peel the back from. Okay, so that split just makes it easier to peel the backing sheet off, and so when I'm stamping on there, I like to do it over the split because it just makes it easier later. When we come to cut, you'll want to use some good paper scissors, and you want to go in and actually cut on or slightly inside the line, not outside. So normally when I cut something, I would cut it out and leave a little gap because it looks better when you're going to stick that on. But this is different. Okay, masking, you actually want to go in and actually cut right on or even a little inside the line. And the reason why is because if we cut outside the line, then we're going to end up with like a halo effect around our finished piece, and that won't look the way we want it to look. So I'm actually going to just cut on the line. Now don't worry too much about being super precise, okay? It won't really matter, but we're kind of cutting off most of the outline that is around our little pussycat. Okay, can you see I've cut off quite a bit? So actually some of my outline is on the bit that I've just cut. And I'm going to continue and I'm going to do the whole thing. Then when we've got this stamped, we're going to be doing a bit of colouring, and at that point I'll probably speed up the camera a little bit so you haven't got to sit there and watch me colour all day long. But if you want to create this yourself, you can always pause the video, and that's the good thing about pre-recorded videos. You can pause them so that you can take your time and create the project along with me, and you don't ever get behind. So that's the good thing about a pre-recorded video. A live video, you have to work at the pace I'm working at, but a pre-recorded one you don't. So that's pretty cool. All right, let's come in here. And as you can see, I'm not going too slow. I'm not going too quickly, but I'm not going too slowly either. I'm not too worried about how this is going to look. The most important thing is that the image is cut out. And if it's not perfectly exact, that actually won't matter when we do our stamping. I'm just going to come in here and come in around his little tail. There we go. So now he's cut out. All right. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting this one on top of this one. All right, so you can see the outline is still there when I take that away, but I'm going to use that split in the back to take the backing off, so that now my little pussycat is sticky. Can you see that? And then we're going to stick him on top. What I love about masking, it really is a magical technique because it actually makes you, it gives an illusion that something is behind something else. It is quite a magical look. Okay, so we're lining it up almost exactly with the piece, as close as you possibly can to the image that you put on first. Now we're going to ink up our basket. And I want to give you some tips and ideas as we go along on how you're going to, how you're going to do things like the split in the back, about cutting it in just inside the line. Now this piece, I want his paws to be just in front. So this means I need to have my basket slightly higher. I'm deciding where I will put it. I want him on one side of the basket. And like I said, I want his paws to be a little bit down. So I'm going to show you what this looks like in a moment, and you're going to think, really? It doesn't look right. And you're right, it doesn't. Okay, so now we have a little pussycat right there in front of the basket, but can you see the basket is stamped over the top of him? That's okay, because when we end up taking him off, which I'm not going to do just yet, you could do it now if you wanted to, but can you see how the little, here it looks like he's in front? If you want to, you can leave this in place while you do your colouring. It looks quite good, or you can take it off. If you've got a good steady hand when it comes to colouring and you're not worried about the colour going over, like if I'm colouring the basket, I'm not worried about the colour going onto him. I could take that off any time, but I'm actually going to leave it on. It'll just give me a little bit more protection, so I'm not going to get any of my basket colouring on my pussycat. Okay, so the colours I wanted to use today, I'm going to use soft suede and a bit of crumb cake to create this look. So soft suede is the darker colour, and that is this one here. So we've got dark soft suede. I find for this kind of colouring, I'm going to put it now on the base. For this kind of colouring, I find it looks better if I use the thin end, but if you have a big space to colour, then you'll want to use the fat end. So you can see the fat end has this fat line here, and the skinny end has this skinny line. This is the thin end. So I'm going to colour with my darker colour right here along this ridge up until I get to the pussycat. And then I'm going to go, because I've got the thin end, I'll just go right along that line there. And the same over on the other side. Just like that. And then I'm going to get the thin end. Well, actually it wouldn't matter so much because this is a slightly bigger, but if you're worried about going over the lines at all, you might want to use the thin one. The fat one, I tend to use both. So I've got like, and then I'm going to finish it off at the top there with the thin end. Okay, now I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to colour this whole basket in. I'm going to speed up the camera and I'll be back with you in a moment. Okay, so now you can see I've still got my paper here. I'm not going to take it off. Oh, I just missed a bit. I noticed I missed a bit just up there above his head. All right, I'm not going to take him off yet, even though it's just got a tiny, tiny bit of his ears over. But I want to put the apples on, or whichever. Actually, this little set is a bit of fun because you can have apples, hearts, or craft supplies. And, you know, craft supplies are pretty cool, right? But I'm going to use apples. And let me pop them on a block. Okay, so, oh, I got the hearts, not the apples. Here are the apples. All right, here they go. Pop them on. I'm going to use Memento again for them. And by leaving him in, even though it's only the tiny tips of his ears, they will look like they're in front as well. So until you've done all your stamping, you probably want to leave your piece in place. However, don't worry if you take it off because there's so little going on. Whoops. So I'm going to put line up our apples there. Right, and see how good they look. I love that this set lines up so beautifully. All right, so this is, once again, I'm going to go in and I'm going to use, you can use Poppy Parade if you want your apples to be a little bit more orangey, or Real Red if you want them to be super red, which I do. I've decided the red is a good look. So I've got those here. And then we've got Granny Apple Green, which is the same colour as our cardstock that we're going to use around, light and dark. And here we go. Let's do some apples. Okay, so here we go. We've got our little pussycat ready to come off. I'm going to take that mask off. Be very careful when you peel the mask. You don't want to rip it off and then rip off the surface of your cardstock. If you take it gently. Now look, he looks like he's right there in front of the apples. Doesn't it look good? I really think that looks great. Now we get to decide what color we would like our pussycat to be. So I don't know about you, but we have two. One of them is actually just on the other side of my camera over there, and he's fast asleep in the sun right now, and he is an orange cat. His name is Crumpet. For those of you who haven't met him, he usually makes himself known through my videos at some point. I'm deciding whether I'm going to go with an orange ginger cat like Crumpet, or whether I go black and white like Merlot. So the one that I did previously, this one looks like Crumpet, okay? Tiny bit of white here on his face. He's actually pretty orange. He doesn't have a lot of white on him. But this one I'm thinking I might do like our other cat, who's a lot of white on him and a little bit of black. A little bit of black. So maybe that's what we do. Now, believe it or not, Stampin' Up! Does actually have a black and like a dark black and a light black blend, which you can use. And I'm just going to go with the light one. They're both black as far as I'm concerned. But I'm not going to do very much black on Merlot because he doesn't have very much black. He has a little bit on his forehead. Like this. And a little bit that comes in from the side. He has a lot of black on his back. But you can't really see that very much. And he has black. He has a black tail, actually. Mostly black. I'm just going to make it a bit stripy. But Merlot, yeah, he doesn't have a lot of black on him. So I'll have to show you a photo of the two cats so you can see the difference. So this looks a lot like Merlot. There you go. And you don't need to do a lot with it. If you want to make it blacker, you can go up to the dark black. There's not a lot of difference, but you can see the dark black is a little blacker when you... All right, so I'm going to go with that. The light black is really more like a dark grey. All right, happy with that. Now there is one last thing I want to do, and I want to create a little bit of shadow down under here, and I have the smoky slate. Light smoky slate is a great color for this. You can see I've got a shadow here. You may not have even noticed it. It's interesting. When you're putting on, it feels, I'm using the thin end, it feels kind of not right, like really, what are we doing? But once you put it on, it actually helps ground your image. Don't forget we've taken our mask away, so you don't want to go over the pussycat now. I'm just going to build that shadow a little bit more. I'm kind of following the line of the pussycat. Just like that. So now there's a bit of a shadow going on there, which is kind of nice, right? Of course, we're going to need a sentiment, so I'm going to grab my, this is what block is this? This is H block. And I'm going to put this, you fill my day with happiness, on H block, and I'm going to stamp it once again in Memento Black. You can have other colors if you prefer, but because we used black for the outlines, I'm using it for my sentiment as well. And because it's a fairly, this is a solid stamp and I want it to stamp well, I'm going to use a matte underneath. And I'm going to put it right here. Oh, actually, I've got a little bit more black. That's better. And we're going to do, just making sure I've got that on there straight. It says, you fill my day with happiness, from this Cheerful basket set. There's some other nice greetings in there. Some sending you some get well cheer and inspired by you. So there's some really nice greetings in this set. All right. You fill my day with happiness. It's coming together. And of course, I'm going to pop this on and then add bling after we've done our gluing. So I'm just going to turn that over. And I'm going to use some Tombow. You notice that the alcohol markers have come through the paper. That is perfectly normal. Alcohol markers will always bleed through, but it's okay because no one sees that side. It's going to be glued down, so we don't mind. It's also why I also use always scrap paper underneath, because in case it bleeds through the paper and goes on to whatever's underneath, I don't really want it to go onto my table. Here we go. And so it's my Granny Apple Green matte here. down. And then once again, I'm going to fold my basic white. This is basic white thick that I'm using as my card base. I prefer basic white thick because I like a good solid card base. And then add some, now I'm using Tombow, but you can use whatever glue you like. Sometimes I use Seal, depends on whatever's handy. I do like Tombow or multi-purpose glue, also known as, you can see the big multi written on that, multi-liquid glue, and I like it because it is a liquid and therefore it takes a little while to dry, which means you've got a moment to kind of wriggle it into place. Whereas if you use Seal or tape, once it's down, it's down. And if you wanted to move it for some reason, like you made a mistake or something needed to be lifted, wasn't quite straight, any of those things, you would find it much more difficult. All right, so I'm going to use, I'm deciding what color to go with. I've got a few different colors here that would look really rather nice. I'm thinking, let's go with, oh, well, that one decided where it was going to go all by itself. And then I'm going to do a couple of small ones up the top here. These are the matte decorative dots. They're actually in color dots, but they go quite nicely. This, even though Sweet Sorbet is a softer red than real red, it still goes quite nicely. And on this one I used iridescent rhinestones, which everyone knows are my favorite of all, but there you go. So now we have a little black and white pussycat and a ginger pussycat. You could do it any colors that you would like. My little crumpet is rolling around in the sun just out of camera view. I don't want to bring him over because then I've got to completely rejig the desk, but you'll just have to take my word for it. But that's what he looks like. So there you go. So that's our first masking technique. So just remember the tips with this one are, when you're stamping, you think about what's going to be in front, number one, and that's the first one you stamp. Then you mask that image and you stamp the image that's going to be behind that. And you can make anything look like you are, you've got something behind the thing that you stamped first. But just remember, we start at the front and we work backwards. Okay, so I hope you like those. I will be back again with another one, so I'm going to get the desk set up for the next video, and I'll be back in just a moment.